channel. Today I've potted down here to the Lizard Peninsula and I'm going down to the stunning little village of Mullion Cove and then heading up onto the southwest coast path to Polurrian Beach. So let's get going. There's no car park in the village, so we're on this Porthmelon car park, which has an honesty box of £1, which is unusual in this day and age. But I'm all for it, so let's go. We've got about a quarter of a mile to walk down to the cove, so it's not far. The rising tide. What do you think about it? Not much. Knickknacks and things. So here we are at the cove and the view immediately grabs your attention. It's not just some pretty postcard scene. There's an absolute ton of history packed into this little corner of Cornwall. What we're looking at here are the harbour walls, and here's where it gets interesting. Those stone piers were constructed between 1890 and 1897, and they were partly funded by Lord Robarts of Lanhydrock. But here's the thing, they obviously weren't just built to make the place look nice. This was a working fishing village during the height of the Cornish pilchard fishing industry, and these harbours were absolutely essential. Back in the 1800s, we're talking about some truly staggering catches. In 1826, fishermen pulled in 150 hogsheads. That's roughly 450,000 fish in just one catch. And in 1830 they hauled in 600 hogsheads in a single week. Can you imagine? A hogshead held about 3,000 fish each. So we're talking about nearly 1.8 million pilchards going through this tiny cove. It was absolute chaos down here during peak season. There's a net loft at the top. There's a couple of holiday homes up here, of course. Just when I walk round. We've got this side first. That's a good old winding machinery. Don't think that's been used for a little while. In case anyone was wondering. It's a shame the weather's not a bit better. I think that net loft's been there a little while. How's that for an unusual seat? Oops, don't trip over the stones. Warning, keep off walls in stormy seas. I could get wet here if I'm not careful. Because I would show up at almost high tide. And here we are. to see the hotel on the cliff top. We'll go up there shortly. These are holes in the rocks. Lizard Adventures. Coast steering. It's coast steering. Kayaking, paddleboarding. Mega sup. What's that mean? Sup. Sup, dude. Lobster pots. Waves sweep over the breakwater. Keep well clear. The public footpath has foundered. No further access. I don't think it has foundered, but never mind, let's have a look. There we go. I'll get a better look of it from the top. Well, it looks like I've got the place to myself today. This is quite nice. Be nice if the sun would come out, but never mind. Can't have everything. That's not good. I suppose I might put those there as a memorial. The buildings around the harbour, you can still see some of them. These were fish cellars and net lofts. The fish would come in, get processed right here, and then exported all over. Italy was a major customer for pilchards at one point. Then their tastes changed, they didn't want them so much. But this was a serious industrial scale fishing going on here for a community of this size. The whole parish, as they call it, was only about 670 around 1900, and that includes Churchtown, the major town in the area. But as for Mullion Cove itself, there would only be one or two that lived down here. I think that pole on the end of the pier used to be an electric light about 100 years ago. I'll tell you the story of that when we get a bit further up. What looks like somebody's backyard is actually the steps to the coast path. So we'll head on up. Quite steep. Nice to lay out and look at the harbour when the sun's shining. Well, we'll leave Mullion Cove alone for a little while and head along this tiny path. One of the problems with cliff paths is that they have quite steep slopes to climb up the cliffs. Who'd have thunk it? Yeah, here we are. I think this path must have washed away at some point because they've got a seat up there, but then they've got an extra step there. So, yes, oh well. Up we go. The whole route there and back is probably a little less than 2 miles, but when those 2 miles are quite uppy downy, it takes it out of you a bit. Well, I made it to the top. Let's have a sit down and have a breather. Okay. Right, now let me tell you something genuinely special from a geological perspective. You see the big rocks sticking up down there, those sea stacks? That's Henskath and Scovarn. They're made from serpentine rock, which is absolutely unique to this area. Serpentine's a metamorphic rock that was originally part of the ocean floor. We're talking ancient oceanic crust that got thrust up and over the continental rocks something like 350 million years ago. The whole peninsula is basically a slice of ancient seafloor that's been turned inside out and thrust up onto the land. It's genuinely incredible. Here's where it gets interesting, because the rocks, particularly the serpentine, absolutely captured people's imaginations. For centuries, locals used serpentine as building material in their homes and farm buildings. But it was someone called Mr. Drew who first saw the real potential. When he arrived at the Lizard in 1828 to repair the lighthouse, he noticed how beautifully the serpentine stone polished. He developed techniques to buff it to an absolute gorgeous lustre, this deep rich sheen, and then opened a commercial concern in Penzance, cutting and carving ornamental items. The real game changer came in 1846. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were sailing past Cornwall on a royal yacht, as you do, and they were shown specimens of polished serpentine. They were absolutely enchanted by it. The royal couple not only made an unscheduled visit to see the rock in its natural surroundings, they actually ordered serpentine items from their Osborne house on the Isle of Wight. They wanted mantelpieces, vases and more. It was a massive royal endorsement. Then in 1851 the Great Exhibition opened in Hyde Park, and serpentine was displayed to 6 million visitors over the course of 5 months. Suddenly everyone wanted serpentine. It was the fashionable material. Grand country houses were clamouring for it. There were orders for towering obelisks, columns, fireplace mantles, ecclesiastical pieces. It was absolutely booming. By 1855, the Lizard Serpentine Company had built a factory at Mullion Cove, just over the hill from where we are now, in the sheltered Poltesco Valley. At that time there were only 2 such serpentine factories in the entire world, and this was one of them. They had a massive water wheel to power the polishing equipment, Workers carved and shaped the stone, and flat-bottomed barges would ferry finished pieces down to schooners waiting in the bay to ship them all over Britain and beyond. You can still walk down to Mullion Cove today. It's managed by the National Trust, and you can see the ruins of that factory. There's still a warehouse standing, and you can make out the foundations, the wheel pit, all the infrastructure. It's haunting really, this once bustling industrial site, now silent and overgrown. But here's the thing, like all fashions, Serpentine eventually fell out of favour. Rising transportation costs, competition from cheaper imported marble, and the fact that Serpentine is actually quite brittle. It doesn't weather well on the outside of buildings in polluted air, and it all contributed to its decline. The factory operated until 1870, then shifted to working with marble instead, and finally closed completely in 1893. Today, where there were once dozens of thriving family workshops around the area, only about 5 local Serpentine craftspeople remain. It's a shame really. This beautiful stone, this glimpse into Victorian consumer culture and royal fashion, is now just mostly a historical curiosity. Though you can still find Serpentine ornaments and souvenirs around Cornwall if you look carefully. Little reminders of the day when this local stone was the height of fashion and inspiration. And then out there we have Mullion Island, which is made entirely from pillow lavas. These are formed when hot lava erupts on the ocean floor and cools instantly when it hits the cold seawater. Instead of flowing like normal lava, it forms these pillow-shaped segments. You're literally looking at ancient mid-ocean ridge eruptions, preserved and accessible to walk around. That's if you've got a rowboat to get over there. And here's an old cannon. I don't know who they whipped that away from. I don't know if it was from the Spanish Armada, because they used to steal their ships and bring them back and then just ravage everything they could make of it that was any use. A lot of these old cannons were upended and used to tie boats to on quays. This one's seen better days, obviously. The cliffs around here are mostly made from hornblende schist and rich soil schists. These are metamorphic rocks that have been cooked and squeezed during mountain building collisions millions of years ago. So what you've got here is an absolutely unique outdoor geology lesson. So imagine it's the 1600s and England is paranoid about Spanish invasion. There's been the Spanish Armada in 1588, and then in 1595 Spanish raiders actually invaded several Cornish villages. They burned Mousehole, attacked Penzance, the whole lot. So the English government set up a ring of fire, a series of beacons that are around the coast that could be lit with any warning of invasion. Mullion Cove was one of the beacon sites, right where the Mullion Cove Hotel is now. One night, the night watchman, this old man who's supposed to be keeping an eye out for Spanish galleys, sees a boat coming in out of the fog. He's absolutely terrified. He shouts, "Who goes here?" to the boat. And the fishermen shout back, "Fish and panniers." And here's the thing, in the fog and the panic, the old watchman hears fish and panniers and somehow translates this in his mind to French and Spaniards. He absolutely loses it. He panics completely, runs off and lights the beacon at the top of the cliff. Within minutes he's lit the entire ring of fire. Other beacon watchers up and down the coast are lighting their beacons, thinking there's a full Spanish invasion underway. The whole of Cornwall's in an absolute panic mode. People are running around grabbing weapons and thinking the Spanish are coming. Can you imagine the absolute embarrassment when they figured out it was just a fishing boat? This local legend is basically the medieval version of a false alarm, sending the entire neighbourhood into chaos. I wonder how long it took for that story to stop being brought up at the pub. So, as we're walking up from the harbour, you can't miss the Mullion Cove Hotel dominating the skyline. The place was built in 1898 and it's got quite a story. When it was constructed, the Victorian railways were starting to expand down into Cornwall, and property developers were betting big on the Lizard becoming a major tourist destination. So they built 3 grand hotels: the Poldu, the Polurrian, and this one, Mullion Cove. It was built using locally sourced stone, and it had 140 electric lights throughout. In 1898. That was incredibly modern and luxurious. The hotel even had its own electricity generator, a Crossley oil engine housed in a building at the back. Pretty impressive at the time. A year later, Veal & Co. laid electric cabling from the hotel to the main pier, where an electric light was fitted to help the boats return to harbour during the evenings. It was the job of the restaurant manager in there to make sure that the light was turned on each evening. Although the restaurant's had a few makeovers since in that time, they still keep the switch visible in the restaurant to this day, if you can find it. But I'm not going to go searching, just in case people wonder what I'm up to. Egg and chips, and let me look at your light switch. Doesn't really work, does it? The location was chosen obviously for the views. From the top floors, guests could see all the way to Mounts Bay, Penzance, Newlyn, and across to St Michael's Mount. It must have been absolutely spectacular for Victorian tourists. There's a funny detail. When the Gross family took over the hotel in 2006, the original managing director described the bathing situation as a 2-scotch bath, meaning by the time the water was hot enough to bathe, you'd have had enough time to have 2 scotches in the bar before returning to your room. Let's say the plumbing and heating systems have been upgraded a lot since then. They've done extensive renovations, including opening this spa in 2019, and the restaurant's maintained its 2 AA rosettes since 2013. It's a genuinely lovely spot to stay if you want to break up your walk. Maybe go in and check for the switch. Yeah, that's quite a fancy spa, isn't it? And swimming pool. Very nice. There's 2 people in there as well. So, leaving the hotel behind, we come around here and back onto the coast path. Sneeze and you could miss it. But here we are. This is a good all-round view from this spot. There's even a glimpse of sunshine, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Now, if you're interested in dramatic stories, this cove has got plenty. Let me tell you about one particular eerie incident. In March 1867, during a gale, a Dutch sailing ship called the Jonkheer was driven into the rocks here, including the captain, his wife and their family. They were caught up in the absolutely brutal conditions. The ship was literally smashed to pieces. Here's where it gets weird. When the ship was found, there was only one survivor, a man called Giorgio Buffoni, who was found stumbling around on the rocks. Incredibly lucky, right? But here's the thing, and this is recorded in local accounts. Buffoni was apparently the sole survivor of 3 different shipwrecks. The locals started to see him as a harbinger of bad luck. They became seriously suspicious of him. Was it just extremely bad luck, or was there something more sinister going on? We'll probably never know, but very soon after the inquest into this wreck, Buffoni disappeared from Mullion and was never seen in the village again. Pretty spooky stuff. So we're now walking north along the southwest coast path towards Polurrian Beach. This is where the scenery really starts to show off. The path is mostly cliff-top walking, which is brilliant because you're constantly looking out over Mounts Bay. The views are genuinely stunning. You've got the rocky coastline, the offshore islands, and the sea constantly changing depending on the weather and tide. Now, time of year matters, and of course I'm at the wrong end of the year. If you can, walk this route in late spring, April, May or early June, because the cliff tops are absolutely covered in wildflowers. All we've got at the moment is gorse bushes. You'll see sea thrift with its delicate pink flowers. White and pink sea campion grow here. Yellow and orange kidney vetch, and if you're here in late summer, the rare Cornish heath with its pale pink flowers, which only grows where serpentine rock occurs apparently. There's also about 20 species of clover along this section. It's quite beautiful. You have to take my word for it. As we round this bend, you can now see Polurrian on the Lizard Hotel coming into view. And this is a genuinely impressive building, perched right on the cliffs. The Polurrian on the Lizard is another one of those Victorian railway hotels, originally built in 1890. But here's where it gets interesting. In 1901, Guglielmo Marconi stayed here. This was during one of the most important moments in telecommunications history. Marconi was in the area because he was setting up his wireless telegraph station at nearby Mullion Cove. And on December 12, 1901, from that station, he sent the first ever transatlantic radio signal from Cornwall to Signal Hill in St. John's, Newfoundland. That's roughly 2,100 miles across the Atlantic. It was an absolutely revolutionary moment. Here at the hotel, Marconi would have stayed, planned his experiments, and probably celebrated one of the greatest achievements in the history of communication. That's an interesting outcrop. I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it underneath. It's amazing how all this rock was just shoved up from the bottom of the earth and ends up here, growing wildflowers. Aha, I don't need to go and put it at the bottom. It's called Carrag Luz, or Love Rock. Well, I'm not going climbing up there, it's a bit too windy. I haven't brought my swimming trunks. Another one for sale. People are getting hard up. Yeah, so that would do for a nice little weekend bungalow, wouldn't it? Have to win the lottery first. Some late fuchsias. Very nice to see though. Yes. Another view of the Polurrian with its few chalets around the back. If you fancy a holiday there. I said there are some nice houses along here, which is true, but that's a great leviathan of a thing, that building there. Nice view for them anyway. Cornwall's palm trees. The building on the end is the, I believe, is the Polurrian Hotel, but it's now an old folks' home. That's not a bad place to be if you're an old folk looking out your window, is it? Just see your days through. It says welcome and then the gate's shut. So, not that welcome. All the autumn colours are happening. This is the very grand Polurrian on the Lizard, as they call it. You can't actually see it from the coast path, so I've just snuck in the grounds because why not? Adventure playground for kiddies. And the obligatory tennis courts, of course. The hotel's got an incredible terrace with views across the bay, and according to historical records, it's hosted some pretty impressive guests, including Winston Churchill and Hollywood stars Clark Gable and Gene Tierney, who stayed here in 1953 while filming Never Let Me Go. I've never seen it. Here's a bit of drama. In 1909, a massive fire devastated the original hotel, destroying almost everything except for the terraces and the steps near the tennis courts, which you can apparently still see today if you look carefully. A new hotel was rebuilt on the site and it's been operating ever since. During the Second World War, it was converted into an officers' mess for RAF Predenac, and today it's been recently refurbished and is still welcoming guests. Just a few steps down to the beach. This is the easy part. Just trying to get back up here again. The sea's making its presence known. I think that one got a bit washed away as you go around the edge. Shall we follow other people's lead and go down this grassy path instead? Whoa, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. It's a bit wet underfoot. So here we are at Polurrian Beach. It's a proper golden sandy beach. It's really beautiful, but it's also quite exposed. You notice signs about strong undercurrents and powerful Atlantic swell. The beach is made for surfing. You'll often see surfers here tackling some genuinely impressive waves. What's really cool about Polurrian is at low tide it reveals itself in its full glory. There's acres and acres of golden sand, but there's also rocky outcrops and interesting rock formations, including what's called Cathedral Rock. The geology is here just as dramatic as the beaches. Serpentine rocks, schists, dark volcanic material all contribute to the raw elemental feel of the place. I thought the tide might be all the way in, but it's not. We've got a bit of beach left. The thing to note about this place is there's no facilities at all. There's no parking, no toilets, no cafe. Well, that's probably part of the charm, really. Yeah, you have to access this beach purely on foot from the coast path, which means it stays wild and relatively undisturbed compared to easier access beaches. If you want facilities, you have to head back to the hotel or walk a bit further up that way and go to Polurrian Cove. We'll cover that in another video. So that's our walk from Mullion Cove, with its history of pilchard fishing, its dramatic geology, its legendary beacon fire mix-up, and its iconic Victorian hotel, all the way to the wild and beautiful Polurrian Beach. Along the way we've passed through centuries of history, Spanish invasions, major shipwrecks, the birth of wireless communication, and some of the most dramatic coastal geology in Britain. This is generally one of my favourite walks on the southwest coast path. The scenery is constantly changing, the history is absolutely fascinating, and you get a real sense of being somewhere remote and special. Whether you're interested in geology, maritime history, or just stunning coastal landscapes, this route's got something for everyone. Even finishing with a bit of sunlight. If you do walk this route, take your time. There's steep sections and the path can be muddy after rain. Wear proper footwear, bring water, and time your walk to take advantage of the tide if you want to spend time on the beaches. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this walk and these stories, please hit the like button, subscribe for more coastal walks and travel adventures, and let me know in the comments, what's your favourite walk on the southwest coast path? Have you been to Mullion or Polurrian? I'd love to hear your stories. See you next time.